Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Wednesdays. I'm your host, Carla Coleman, Director of Communications for New Salem Baptist Church, and we have back with us, yay, our co-host, Paige Reynolds. Paige, say hello.
Hi, good evening, everyone. It's so nice to be back.
Yeah, we missed you, Paige. We really did. So tonight we have a topic that's a very serious one, and one that's is important in ministry actually at New Salem Baptist Church, and that's human trafficking. The New Salem Women of Power Anti-Human Trafficking Ministry has had the full support and leadership of our First Lady and also our Wellness Wednesdays executive producer, Minister Brenda Troy. Human trafficking is the use of force, fraud, manipulation, or coercion to obtain labor or commercial sex acts. Every year, millions of men, women, and children are trafficked worldwide, including right here in Columbus, Ohio. It can happen in any community, and victims can be any age, race, gender, or nationality. This Wednesday's featured guest is Sister Jenice Tate and Sister Jelise Roberts, who are both co-founders of Project Voice Inc., who provide advocacy and prevention for survivors, and they're here to discuss the truth about human trafficking. So welcome, Jelise and Jenice. Glad to have you here on Wellness Wednesdays.
Thank you.
As you know, I'd like for you guys to introduce yourself real quick. I know you have a nice presentation for us, just to really bring truth to us as far as what's really happening as far as human trafficking is concerned. But let's start with you, Jenice. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Good evening. My name is Jenice Tate, and I'm co-founder of Project Voice Inc. A little bit about myself. My background is actually in chemical dependency. I'm a licensed chemical dependency counselor. I've been doing advocacy in and around the Columbus and actually the Ohio area for survivors of human trafficking and sexual assault. We also do prevention. So that's just a little bit about me.
Awesome.
Hi.
Thank you. And here's Jelise. Jelise, tell us about yourself.
My name is Jelise Roberts, and I was Jenice, started Project Voice. And a little bit about my background. I'm a designer and artist, actually, and I've been in that field for a good portion of my professional career, and definitely have a high focus in advocacy for survivors, again, with human trafficking and just raising awareness. And I have a really special place in my heart for the youth as well. So that's where I spend a lot of my focus.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, like I said, they have a nice presentation for us tonight. Why don't we go ahead and jump right in so that we'll have time for questions at the end. Let's put up the first slide.
Okay, perfect. Well, already, we're going to talk about the truth about human trafficking. And you can go to the next slide. And this is just a little brief synopsis of what we'll be talking about. We'll briefly discuss our who we are as an organization, the myths and misconceptions of human trafficking, as well as defining human trafficking and what it looks like, and the domestic minors and the contributing factors, as well as the impact on the victims, and some of the solutions that we can take in joining the fight against human trafficking. You can go to the next slide. So a little bit about Project Voice. We founded Project Voice back in 2010, and VOICE is an acronym for Victory Over Intense Circumstances and Elevating to Purpose. We started as a 501c3, and we have our main focus, I would say, is just raising and increasing public awareness on these national issues. And not just nationally, but what's happening sometimes right underneath our noses, within our families, in our churches, and in our communities. And so we just find it very important to just talk about it. And one of our mottos is "Your voice saves lives." We're both wearing those t-shirts. And so we just encourage people to talk, and we educate and just let people know what it really looks like we talked about, and we'll discuss a little bit further later on in this presentation. But one of our main focuses is prevention. We definitely focus on, providing services and group counseling and individual counseling to survivors and victims of human trafficking, and offer them with support services and resources. But we have a high focus on prevention, and just getting to our youth. And because we really want our youth to learn from us, than being presented with this, and having to learn in a completely different way, and their lives being changed for the worse, So we just definitely focus on that. And one of the ways we do that is through what we call an empowerment workshop. And so we found these workshops to just be extremely effective, and impactful for our youth as well. And we kind of touch on just healthy relationships and what that looks like, setting boundaries, and also just being advocates and looking out for each other. And just knowing the signs of what human trafficking looks like, again, because we rather them learn from us than being caught up in that situation and not knowing what to do. So that's one of the main things. But we absolutely could not do this by ourselves. So we definitely collaborate with many organizations, youth organizations, schools, Catch Court, DOMA, all over Ohio, but outside of Ohio as well. So this is not a us versus them type of thing. In order to make a difference with this human trafficking issue, we have to come together as a unit to create life-giving impact. You can go to the next slide. So in a part of the empowerment series that we do, we end the empowerment series with art and resilience. And this is just kind of a fun way, because the topic of human trafficking is so heavy, right? And so we kind of focus on art and resilience to literally do that, teach them resiliency through art. And so we give them all their own individual boxes. As you can see, they get t-shirts and different, like their paint and paintbrushes and just journals and stickers. And we basically allow them to create gratitude jars. But before we get into the activity, if you go to the next slide, you will see that we basically teach them about the colors of life. And here's just an example of one of the colors. So this color obviously is blue. And behind this color, this is the color of belief. And we tie the colors into just emotional and different things that pertain to this color. So if you are not in your resilient state, or if you've been through a lot of trauma, sometimes there's different feelings that could come up, or there's lies that you'll tell yourself. So you might you'll feel sad, and it's just holding on to different emotions that you might want to release, right? Or you might not speak up for yourself. So our main thing is to help them understand when they're operating in resilience and when they're not, when they're in balance and when they're not, and to always encourage them, especially like with this color, with belief, to speak their truth, and understanding that it's okay to speak your truth in compassion and out of love. You can go to the next slide. So with that, each color also has an affirmation. So we kind of explain resiliency like a rubber band. Sometimes in life you can get stretched out of, just out of sorts, but to come back to shape, right? So if you notice that you're not speaking your truth, you notice that these things you're being suppressed or held back on whatever situation is causing you to do that, speak up, express yourself with care and love, but understand what you speak ties into what you believe and activates your reality. And you can go to the next slide. So this is just a slide of them working on their gratitude jars, and they could choose whatever color that they like, just to have fun, not to overthink what it turns out to look like, and or if there is a color that they want to attract more into their life. If they want the whole jar to be blue because they want to have a bolder voice, paint the jar blue. But each day be conscious and put something that you're grateful for in the jar. You can go to the next slide. So a little bit, we're going to dive into the truth about human trafficking. Next slide. And just to start, we're going to talk about some of the myths of human trafficking. And so the first myth, human trafficking is always a violent crime perpetrated by a stranger. And, and there are instances where victims are kidnapped and trafficked. Yes, that does happen. However, most trafficking victims are groomed, and, they are brought into that life by an acquaintance or someone, unfortunately, that they trust. So that's why that's a myth. The second one is only women and girls can be trafficked. That's not the truth. Increasingly, there are a number of young men and boys that are being trafficked. And the third one is human trafficking is only sex trafficking, and that's not true either. That is a myth. Human trafficking, 68% of the 25 estimated trafficking victims globally are trafficked for labor. So these are just kind of the things that we're going to talk about within this presentation, just to kind of let you know the truth about human trafficking. Now, I'm going to pass it over to Jenice, and I'll let you take it from here, Jenny.
I think you're on mute, Jenice. No, we cannot. Okay, hold on. We're having a little trouble.
Go ahead and speak, dear Jenice. Go on.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
You can hear me now? Okay. Sorry about that. You can go ahead to the next slide. Okay, so the first thing I want to do to kick this off is I want to give you guys this quote that we received when Jelise and I were doing a focus group, and we were actually doing a case study on some trafficking cases that had been in the news. That wasn't human trafficking. They just got caught up with a bunch of fast tail girls. Okay. They, in that instance, meaning the traffickers. And I wanted to bring this particular quote into our training today, because unfortunately, that is how a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot, that is how too many people feel about when it comes to human trafficking. Okay, fast tail girls blaming the victim. Okay, go ahead to the next slide. So what is human trafficking? A form of modern day slavery, exploitation of men, women, and children for the commercial, sex, or labor purposes. Okay, it's the second largest and fastest growing criminal industry in the world. All right, drugs gets sold one time and it's gone. Guns get sold one time and it's gone. All right. unfortunately, when young ladies or young men are being trafficked, they can be trafficked over and over and over again. Okay. We can go to the next slide. This is just an example of the impact that it has on us globally. 99 billion per year made from sex trafficking, okay? 51 billion from labor trafficking. So you have millions of people being trafficked, making billions of dollars, okay? Go ahead to the next slide. Forms of trafficking, and I don't want to get into the full definition. In labor trafficking and sex trafficking, force, fraud, or coercion. Okay, coercion is threats. So force, which is normally violence, unfortunately, with the survivors that we've worked with, fraud, making promises that they have no intention of keeping. And when I say they, I mean the traffickers. And coercion is threats, you know. So force, fraud, and coercion, when you think about trafficking, think about those three when it comes to human trafficking. They are always present. You can go to the next slide. All right. So I talk about the force, fraud, and coercion because when we are doing trainings and awareness, we hear rumblings because we want to know, you know, what our audience is thinking. What are your thoughts about trafficking? And we will hear a lot of times, well, she wants to be out there. She doesn't have to be out there. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You know, I'm pretty sure she would, if she had the resources or the life skills, she would better work at Chase or Ohio Health, nationwide, right? So we have to kind of be mindful about that. You can go to the next slide. Actually, go back one more time. So also with the force, what do you think happens if she doesn't have all the money that she's supposed to bring back to her trafficker? Okay. The women that we've worked with in the past, they've had quotas. They've had a certain dollar amount that they had to bring back to their trafficker, okay, or who they refer to as their pimp dope boy, okay? And so if they didn't bring back that certain amount, there was force, there was physical assault, there was sexual assault, sometimes confinement even, okay? So just be mindful of that when we're talking about human trafficking. Okay, now you can go to the next slide. Sex trafficking of minors, and when we say minors, we're just talking about children under the age of 18. Okay, there has been a significant increase, I would say, since I started working in this field in 2010, and in the trafficking of minors. Okay, and sometimes it's kind of frustrating because we don't use the terminology of what it really is, and so that's why we listed them here. Okay, it's statutory rape of a child. Okay, someone under the age of 18 cannot consent. All right, so it's rape. Okay, it's sexual assault on a minor. It's child abuse. It's kidnapping. Okay, and so when minors are involved in trafficking, this is what it is. Okay, it's rape, it's sexual assault, child abuse, kidnapping, and often they also experience that same violence. You can go to the next slide. So who's most vulnerable? Okay, so when we talk to young people, we were able to start actually a workshop in one of the schools back in 2019. And unfortunately, it was discontinued because of COVID as the school year went into 2020. All right. The young ladies that we were working with struggled with behavioral health issues, substance abuse issues, mental health. And unfortunately, they are most vulnerable for being trafficked. Homeless youth, okay, running away, kids that run away often. Who's looking for them, right? If you're a youth that's already homeless, who's really going to look for you? So those are the most vulnerable to be trafficked. Runaways. If you're a chronic runaway, whether it's with your family, whether it may be your foster family, it may be a group home, are they really going to go and look for you? Maybe some of them will, but most often not. And that's why they're most vulnerable. Adolescent survivors of sexual abuse and sexual assault. I've worked with young people that have said, well, now I'm getting paid for it. And it's just heart-wrenching because they were being sexually assaulted or sexually abused by a family member at what she thought was for free. Okay, so we have to be mindful of that as well. Poverty and food insecurities. We hear a lot about that now with food insecurities, where they're using sex to provide for themselves, often called survivor sex. Okay, youth that are currently involved in child protective services, juvenile justice center.
Uh-oh.
Already involved in the commercial sex trade. We did a fair. We were a part of a fair where we set up a table at a church in Cleveland, and they brought a father to come talk to us, and his 17-year-old daughter was teaching the younger daughter or trying to bring her in to that lifestyle, And so, and how he found out about it was he found some, inappropriate pictures and text messages on her phone. And I'm like, sir, she's a minor. Let's get the police involved, And so all of those things are contributing factors as well for our youth to be vulnerable. And then the LGBTQ plus youth, I left the plus off there. Unfortunately, they make up a large percentage of our homeless youth, okay? And so they are also most vulnerable to be trafficked. You can go to the next slide. So how are they brought into the life? How does this happen to them? And so in human trafficking, there's what we refer to as a grooming process. Okay, as Jelise mentioned earlier, does it happen where kids are kidnapped or women or boys are kidnapped? It does happen, but a lot of times they're groomed. Okay, and so the purpose of grooming is to manipulate the person into becoming a co-operating participant in their own abuse or exploitation. Okay, and so why do they groom them?
Wow. We lost you there for a second, Jenice.
Okay.
Okay, can you say why they groom them again?
Okay, sure. It reduces the likelihood of disclosure and increases the likelihood that the victim will become attached and repeatedly returned to the perpetrator. Okay, and what happens is in that grooming process is that trafficker creates what we refer to as a trauma bond. Okay, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But that's what we see a lot of times with the survivors that we work with, whether they're children or adult survivors, that there is a trauma bond created with their trafficker. You can go to the next slide. So one of the impacts that has really changed human trafficking is social media. Okay, social media has contributed to increasing human trafficking, and this is how. On this slide here, we have Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, Yak, Whisper, Tinder, Blender, WhatsApp, Kit, Yellow, #1 chat avenue. And this isn't even all of the social media. Okay. A lot of these I had never even heard of until here recently. But traffickers, and they will use social media to prey on our youth, to prey on those that are vulnerable. A lot of times, how many times have you seen someone post on Facebook or, hey, I'm down right now, or younger people, my parents don't understand me, I can't take it anymore. And that gives a opportunity for a trafficker to come right in. Hey, is everything okay? I understand you. okay? And they begin the communication process that way, all right? I put on here pray versus pray, because a lot of times individuals might use, let's say Facebook, for example, when you're down, if you're going through something, to get their family, friends, and loved ones to pray for them. Like, I'm having a bad day, or I'm down right now, or something of that nature. But traffickers will use social media to pray, P-R-E-Y. Okay, so you want to be mindful about, what you're posting on social media. You want to be mindful about what your children, nieces, nephews, younger cousins, okay, grandchildren, what they're posting on social media. Okay, one of the survivors that we worked with years ago, this is exactly how she was brought into the life of human trafficking. It was a fake modeling ad. And so she went in thinking that she was going to be modeling. And the pictures that they were taking got racier and racier. Okay. And then she started using, and then she was trapped. So you want to be mindful of that. Just a quick story. My daughter came to me not too long ago that someone had reached out to her about modeling with something they saw on her Instagram. And so I'm like, oh no. Okay. So I ended up, of course, doing my research and my investigation. It was legit, so I didn't have to call on them, but I would have. Okay. And I share that story because we have to be mindful. I have seen beautiful pictures of young people, it's graduation time. We see them on Facebook, we see them on Twitter, we see them on Instagram, but we just have to be mindful on who is looking at our children, who are looking at our young men and our young women. Okay. You can go to the next slide. It goes down in the DM. I put that as a title because it's just another way that they are bringing in youth, especially. So now what's going on, since the increase in use of Cash App and Venmo, Zelle, okay, traffickers are able to almost instantly give, let's say, a 17-year-old $20 for nothing. Here you go. Hopefully this day will make you better, make you feel better. And so if you're a 17-year-old high-risk youth, right, and your mom might be struggling with some type of substance or mental health issue, and you're trying to make sure your younger brothers are okay, and you have some man that's going to give you $20, you might take it. She might take it. Okay, so that's just another way that they're bringing them in. Some of the young girls that I would work with often talked about sugar daddies, and then and these were much older men, and it was almost like their way to get by. And I would just try to explain to them, this is a part of the grooming process. Okay, it's and it's what they seem as fun and games. However, they eventually get snatched up. Okay. And so these are just some of the things that our young people are having to deal with. Go ahead to the next slide. Rape culture. I wanted to bring this particular slide in because it's an environment that unfortunately our society has begun to create. Okay, so what is rape culture actually? A society or environment whose prevailing social attitudes have the effect of normalizing or trivializing sexual assault and abuse. Okay, almost blaming the victim. We see this rape culture, unfortunately, sometimes in some of our music, movies, television shows, commercials, okay, which that expands to the strip clubs, pornography, just the commercial sexual exploitation of men and women. So we have to be mindful of the environment that we create for our youth. Now, as a society, we can't, it takes a little bit at a time to change society, but we can definitely change it in our homes. We can change it in our community, start to change it. Blaming the victim. That goes back to that fast tail girls, right? Blaming the victim. Okay. No, she's an underage survivor who was being taken advantage of. Okay. We can go to the next slide. So what is the impact on some of the victims? Just bodily injuries, broken bones, concussions, traumatic brain injuries. They suffer from PTSD, depression, oftentimes homelessness, constant shame and guilt, anxiety. They will develop substance use disorders in order to cope, okay, in order to cope with the trauma or the PTSD. A lot of our young people now that are struggling with not just human trafficking, but just past trauma, any type of past trauma. And we, we question them when they're smoking THC or smoking weed. Weed impedes on traumatic thoughts. So for the moment anyway. And so they'll be able to sleep, or they'll be able to take their mind off of the trauma that they've experienced, or they're using alcohol or popping pills to take their mind off of the trauma. Okay. And so that's the same thing with survivors of human trafficking. All right. They're using to try to deal with the trauma that they've experienced. Self-destruction and suicide. Unfortunately, when it gets to be too much, they see that as the only way out. All right. Complex trauma, and then I also talked about this early traumatic bonding with the trafficker. We had an opportunity with our New Salem human trafficking ministry to do an outreach project, with Teresa Flores. And if Teresa Flores is a survivor of human trafficking, and she's been doing a lot in the community of human trafficking. When I first heard her speak, I didn't understand this trauma bond. And I said, what exactly is it? And she said, and the way she explained it to me, and she was trafficked as a teenager. She's probably in her 50s now. She said, Jenice, trauma bond is this. If they came in here right now, those same men that were trafficking her, I might go with them. Right. Mm-hmm. And I just remember that experience, because in that, it just shook me. And I even looked at the door, because that's just how it shook her. Right. And so that when someone is able to create a trauma bond where you've been freed from that life for 30 to 40 years, but you're still afraid, that's what a trauma bond is. You can go to the next slide. Treatment. Okay, so how can you help these ladies, Jenice? What can be done? What has to happen? They have to have trauma-informed treatment. Okay, by licensed clinicians, social workers that can help them work through and process through that trauma. It is a journey. With survivors of human trafficking. They often need wraparound services with a multidisciplinary team, okay? And what does that look like? A lot of times, when we worked with survivors, they had a probation officer, they had a case manager, they had a counselor. Then they, also had, with the young people, they had a guardian ad litem. Okay, the young people also had a case manager with children's services. And so it's, Jelise spoke about collaborations. It's a wraparound services, all of us putting our heads together to see how we can help these young people and how we can help survivors. A lot of times, minors, continued education. They're going to need to be in school. Adult survivors and the minors are going to need life skills and workforce development. So this is all what it takes to treat survivors. They also often need treatment. Housing, right? Housing, they might be homeless. Next slide. So what do we see? Specifically with the minors, okay? I talked about the substance use disorder, okay? Distrust of adults. A lot of our youth that are struggling and that are in trouble right now, adults have failed them. Ultimately, adults have failed them. I've seen it with the high-risk use. Adults have failed them. And so when they come in contact with an advocate, or a counselor, or even someone in a community that actually cares, there's a level of distrust. Okay, teachers will see truancy, injuries on them as well. They may withdraw, okay, or they may act out. Aggressive behavior, fighting. All of those are, what we see with minors and adults, honestly, when it comes to human trafficking. You can go to the next slide. So solutions, what can you do? Okay, in the fight against human trafficking, the first thing I put down here is prayer. And this picture is actually, Jelise and I are blessed to be a part of the New Salem Women of Power Anti-Human Trafficking Ministry. And this is actually a picture that we had of our ministry leader, Minister Brenda Troy, and one of our other team members, Kiana Stewart, and they were praying with a survivor. Okay, so definitely prayer. Prayer for the survivors, the counselors, the advocates, improvements in our laws and criminal justice systems. Okay, another thing that I put on here as far as solutions, stop with the judgment. So many oftentimes I have seen where survivors feel like they are being judged, young people as well, just different survivors that I've talked to, and they feel that a lot from the body of Christ. Okay, so those of us that are a part of the body of Christ, we need to make sure that we are not judging survivors and women that might be struggling in this lifestyle. I was sharing with our team a couple weeks ago where I was working with some survivors a couple years back, and she shared a story with where they were walking down the street, her and some of her friends, and they were on the same side of a church. Some of the women came out of the church and shoot them. Get on away from here. Oh, get away from here. Shoot them across the street. And they walked across the street. Okay. And so, and that was what church people did. Okay. And it should be the opposite, right? It should be the opposite. How can we help you? Okay. What can we do? If you see something, say something. On the next slide here, we're going to put up the human trafficking number. Okay. Continue to educate yourself just by being on this or agreeing to come on this Wellness Wednesday. You've already started in the fight. You've already started in a fight. Everyone doesn't have to do street outreach like we do, or just all the measures that we're able to take and that we're passionate about. But there is a lot that can be done. One time I had my care group, they signed cards for some survivors that I was working with that were in jail, just to give them some positive, uplifting messages, just to keep your head up. God loves you. I love you. And so that's another something that you can do in this fight against human trafficking. You can go to the next slide. You can go to the next one as well. Also, starting a ministry, right? Or asking how you can support a ministry if your church has one. We're very proud of this photo of our anti-human trafficking. We're looking tough. We don't play, right? And so this is just a way that you can fight, right? And again, it does not mean you have to go and do street outreach, but there are other ways that you can support ministries. You can support other organizations, different things of that nature as well. Next slide. So on here, we went ahead and added resources, the human trafficking hotline number. Now you can also text, be free, okay? And so the hotline number and the text can be used by non-survivors. So like if you see something that's not right, hey, I just saw, if you're not calling the police, you're calling the human trafficking hotline, and that way they can be made aware of a situation or a problem that may plague your community or something that you may see. Okay. That was like the end of our presentation. If there are any questions, feel free and we can go ahead and answer them.
That was wonderful. Great information there, Jenice and Jelise. Paige, do we have any questions in the chat box?
For
Oh, we
sure.
do.
So, yeah.
Excellent.
So, that resource page was like really helpful to have somewhere to call, somewhere to text. But someone is wondering, how do they get information about your specific organization?
Oh, you can go to our website. It is www.victoryinvoice.org. And that's www.victoryinvoice.org.
Excellent.
Yeah. So we'll get that put up. So we have a question that is a little specific to a situation. So I'll read that, and they want to know advice on how to handle it. So it says, so when male choir had rehearsal, we had an episode of a young lady asking for money and offering her services. How should we handle this type of situation when confronted with these propositions? How can we escalate, or who to when we are at church?
Wow. That's an excellent question. And it speaks to how prevalent it is. So, the first thing that you want to do is definitely call the hotline. Let them know that you got propositioned for sex and the location. What you have to be careful about as a male, especially if you're being propositioned, if he were to reach out and try to help her, say, hey, let me take you to New Salem, human trafficking ministry. You don't know who's watching her. Okay. And so you don't know, when we did street outreach with the women that we saw on the streets, there was always a pimp or a trafficker that was not too far from her. Okay. So you have to be mindful of your own safety and well-being as well. So you definitely want to call the hotline. I've also encouraged people. There's here in Columbus, we have a non-reporting number, where it's like a it's like the number that you can call that's not 911, and just kind of tell them, situation, what's going on, as well. And so you can utilize those resources also. But you want to be mindful about approaching, even if you're really trying to help, you're genuine in trying to help. You just have to be mindful, because you do not know who's watching her.
Yes,
Really
that's a
good
very
point.
good point. Because I know when we were out one time doing ministry, we did approach someone, and someone came by us on a bike and spoke to us. And then later, we saw the person on the bike detouring the person that we were trying to help, and so he was obviously a part of everything, but I mean, we had no clue. And so you just have to be safe and just say, no, thank you, and maybe direct them to the church, like you should come to our church, but just be safe and call the number for sure.
Yeah. That's a really good point and explanation. So those are all the questions that we had coming in. Carla, if you have any, you could come in and say yours. But I did have a more specific question regarding people who are, you said it, obviously you can get kidnapped and social media, but what are things to watch out for, like during the day when you're just, someone came up to them, but what are things you should watch out for when you're out and about?
When you're out and about, I always tell or advise young people, you, if possible, go with someone, and to just not be alone. I don't. I want to say this: when I see a significantly older man with a younger lady, my eyebrow gets raised, because I'm like, what's going on here? And especially like one time, this was years ago, they were at the mall shopping. right? And so that's a part of that grooming process. Um, do you jump on the hotline and call and say, hey, there's an older man with a younger woman? Absolutely not. And so, but what I do want us to do, and what the audience to do, is just be aware. Be aware that this is going on. We don't work that much with labor trafficking, for example. In my years, we've only worked with one survivor of labor trafficking, and unfortunately for her, she was actually being trafficked for sex and labor. Okay, but in this field, it just makes us more aware. For example, I was at a basketball game, a college basketball game, and as we were leaving the arena, there was an influx of workers coming in to clean the arena. And so as I'm walking out, I'm like, wow, that 6-year-old shouldn't be cleaning. I'm like, wow, he's probably 11. Wow. And so there was an influx of kids that were working at this arena in the United States that they had no business working. Now, this was prior to COVID. Again, did I jump on the hotline? No, because I don't know what that would have done to those kids, quite honestly. But things like that, I just want your mind thinking like, and just you're aware of what's going on.
I was thinking about.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Jenice.
No, I was just gonna say, a lot of times with the young people in our life, nieces and nephews and younger cousins, unless they're super close to us, we may not say something, or especially when it comes to social media posts, and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, drop a seed in your family to say, hey, you know what? You might want to take that down. Or is everything okay, before somebody else does? So I'm always, I had to get off Facebook because I was just policing it. I was just like, I can't. So, but when it's our family, even if it might be a distant cousin or relative, is everything okay? Because you said, and I just want to make sure that everything is okay. So that's another way that you can, join in our fight, embrace our family and the young people in our lives.
Yeah, I think that's a huge. I'm sorry. Go ahead on, please.
Oh, I was just going to say, just putting too much information on Facebook or on social media and things like that. I know when my daughter was high school in college, we had a cousin in California, and she was doing the same thing. She was policing. She said, Carla, are you sure she should be saying that on Facebook? Because there's people out here that'll take advantage of that. And we hadn't talked to her in almost a year, but that's okay because she's looking out.
Yeah. And we see adults do it. No, I was just saying adults do that as well. And so our young people are doing the same thing. So we just have to be mindful of it.
Yes, because that's like a really good point, because sometimes it is a cry for attention and help, and we have to, as people that care for them, check on them, because if we don't, someone else will prey upon them and use that as an avenue to speak to them, or as their entryway. So I liked what you said there in regard to, hey, is everything okay? Are you doing all right? Just checking on you. I saw your post, so I just wanted to make sure you were okay.
And even if it's just, sometimes it's a teenager or someone who's giving more information than they should. I think they may be fine. It's just that they're not taking certain precautions on social media that they really should. And so I was going to ask that question, and what are some of the things that we can do with our children in our own households to make them aware of the dangers, to make them aware of things that they should and should not do?
I definitely, especially when it comes to adolescents, tell them the truth. This is what's going on. And you need to know about it. You need to be aware of it. Okay. I just think sometimes, so many times, we try to sugarcoat, or we even, well, they're still too young. You know, we worked with middle school girls have been trafficked. And so you want to just tell them the truth about what's going on, to be careful, and also have them educate, their friends and family. And your space with, again, your child, your younger nieces, nephews, grandchildren. It needs to be a safe space. And when I say a safe space, they need to be able to come to you. All right. One thing that we noticed about the workshops that we were able to do, when we did our evaluations, a lot of the participants shared that was one of the they felt safe. And that was probably the best compliment that we could have ever received from a young person, is that in that time with us, they felt safe. And so we can create that in our homes. We can create that with our family, that when I talk to my cousin Carla, I'm safe. You know what I mean? And so I think we need to create that for our families, and create that for our young people.
Right. Because otherwise they're going to find it somewhere else.
Yes.
Right. Exactly.
That they are.
Right. I do want to say, our youth know more than what you think. And a lot of times we've gone into schools and they know sometimes about human trafficking, or they've seen things. And we were kind of surprised, like, oh, okay, well, and so it is important to be honest, because if we're not talking about it, they're going to talk to somebody about it, and hopefully get the right information, but they know more than what you think. So it is important to have those conversations in a compassionate way, and listen with a compassionate ear sometimes, without judgment. And I will also encourage them to not share their location all the time. I'm here, I'm going there. I just showed up here, me and my girl, doing a video, Snapchat, because Snapchat definitely, I believe it pings your location, unless you turn that feature off. And so just being conscious of sharing your location, because if we can see where you are, so can everybody else. So being conscious about that as well.
You said during your presentation that the LGBTQ plus group are mostly vulnerable. Can you talk a little bit more about that, and just how you can create a non-judgmental space for them?
Yeah, and and this is becoming an increased issue in our community, in our society. The LGBTQ plus adolescents, they make up, I think, 40% of the homeless youth. Where when they reveal to their parents or guardians or grandparents that they come out, it's get out. Okay. You're not welcomed here. And so because it's such a large population that they're put out, they are the most vulnerable as well. And so I think, again, there are organizations. I just attended a training with Kaleidoscope. That's one of them, where they work with that population. And again, they're trying to help them work through that trauma. And then also they educate other agencies and organizations on how we can be more welcoming, okay, to that population. But they make up such a large part of the homeless population. That is why they're most vulnerable. One thing that I also want to mention, and again, this is Jenice talking right now. I want to encourage everyone, watch that situation at the border. right? We had all of those migrant children that came over, okay? Those, they're homeless, right? They're immigrant. And so I just hope organizations and agencies down there are putting things and programs in place because they will also become more vulnerable to be trafficked.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The safety net just isn't there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. All right. Well, any other questions in the chat
Yeah, we had a
at all?
question. So regarding
Good.
the location services, we were just talking about, they said, so you should turn off turn off your location. I want my daughters on, so if I need to find her, they can. Could you comment on that?
Absolutely, and I understand that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
When it comes to like social media and things of that nature, when you are posting, and so
Yes.
you just want to be mindful of sharing that information. Going to the mall,
Yes.
going to the store, headed back home.
Yes.
Now I'm in school. Different things of like that nature. But being able to track your daughter, absolutely, I
Yes.
completely understand that. But just educating her on what she's sharing on social media, and if she's not sharing that type of information, then you don't have to worry about. I shouldn't. You know what I mean? That's a less likely of a trafficker tracking your daughter, right? And so, no, I completely understand that. Just make sure she's not sharing, her steps, or where she's
Yeah.
going or where she's
Right.
leaving. With
Or at least like real time, it could say like we went to the movies, maybe you
Yeah.
don't have to say exactly like when you're doing at the exact time, but 100% like as a parent, know where your child is for sure.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Good.
That was a
Good.
great question.
That was a
Yeah.
Yes,
very
it was.
good question. There's a
Hmm.
difference.
It
Any
is.
other questions?
No, there was no more questions, but I just wanted to say with the location thing, sharing it with social media is like a whole nother thing with like, I have my location shared with like specifically just to my mom. So like when
Yeah,
I'm in an
Mhm.
Uber or when I'm like I've
Yes.
got to go somewhere late at night, that's when like location is like important, but not to
Yes.
it's 10 o'clock at night. I need to tell social media I'm going to the store. Like,
Not
absolutely,
to the
absolutely.
public, right?
Yes,
Hmm.
yes. Thank
yeah.
you.
Good. Good clarification. Yep. Okay,
Yes.
great. Well, we're getting close to the top of the hour, and I really wanted Jenice and Jelise to take some time to give us some final thoughts before we leave here, things that they would like us to remember before we go. So, why don't we start with Jenice, and then Jelise, and then we'll go from there, and we'll be ready to go here.
Well, I just want to thank everyone for joining in this Wellness Wednesday, and just encourage you to just keep in the fight, communicate with the young people in your life, and if you see something, say something.
Amen. Absolutely. And Jenice? Sorry, Jelise.
Yes, just exactly what Janice said. And just remember, your voice can save someone's life. So, like she said, see something, say something, call the number, and that just makes all the difference. And just stay aware. Stay aware.
Absolutely. Um, I'm going to ask Michael McGee, our technical director, to put that number up one more time so people can have it. Can you do that, Mike? There it is. So let's take that in so that if we ever need to make that phone call, we can.
Right.
Thank you so much, everyone. Jenice, Angeles, and the Project Voice Inc. co-founders. Really, really great information today. I know I learned a lot. I think
Good.
it's a topic that is we need to all be very, very aware, even as adults who have children, and nieces and nephews, and just, you know, people and children, men, women, and children in our communities, how we can help along the way, because this is extremely serious. We got to find a way to keep people out of the hands of folks who want to exploit them, as much as
Absolutely.
possible. And I really appreciate the two of you and the work you're doing with New Salem Baptist Church in our anti-human trafficking ministry, in trying to help our folks right in our own community here in Linden and Columbus. So thank you so
Absolutely.
much. And thank you, Paige. Good to see you. Glad that you're back. Glad to have my co-host back. And we'll be back next Wednesday for another Wellness Wednesdays. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe and stay healthy. Good night.